Each and every year, there are tons of players that come into the mainstream and become stars in the college football world. Over time, most of them end up getting forgotten, and that's why I'm going to make today's video. Today, I decided to pick 15 random college football stars from the last 20 years, and we're going to talk about who they were and what ultimately ended up happening to them and why you forgot about them. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about 15 college football stars you totally forgot. So going back in time, the first player I want to talk about is former North Carolina running back Elijah Hood. Coming out of Charlotte Catholic High School, this guy was absolutely insane. He finished his career with nearly 9,000 yards and 147 touchdowns, and because of that, Hood was an Army All-American, a top 50 recruit, and the number 7 running back in the class of 2014. Elijah Hood would then go to North Carolina, where as a freshman he ran for 259 yards and 4 touchdowns, and then broke out as a sophomore, running for nearly 1,500 yards and 17 touchdowns. He was one of the best running backs in college football in 2015 and helped UNC have a really special season. In 2016, Hood would end up running for 858 yards and 8 touchdowns, and eventually he'd go off to the NFL. In total at UNC, he finished with 2,600 yards and 29 scores. Hood was invited to the NFL Combine and was eventually drafted by the Oakland Raiders in the 7th round but pick number 242 in the 2017 NFL Draft. Sadly, he was never really able to make it much there and never recorded an official NFL stat. He did also spend time with the Panthers and Jacksonville, but eventually was waived and went to the XFL. Up next, we need to talk about Gerod Holliman. Coming out of Miami Southridge High School, Holliman was one of the top recruits in the class of 2011, as he was ranked inside the top 100 and was the number 4 safety overall. Holliman would end up enrolling at Louisville, where after redshirting in 2011, he would do very little his first 3 years on campus. He combined for about 15 tackles in his first 2 seasons on the field with the Cardinals, but then randomly broke out into one of the best players in college football in 2014. What do I mean by that? Well, he finished with 44 tackles, 1 sack, and 1 forced fumble, but actually led all of college football with 14 interceptions. The guy was an absolute ball hawk and was always a threat to pick the quarterback off, and was the number 1 player during the 2014 season in terms of interceptions. To me, that makes you a college football superstar, but Holliman did not really see much success after that. He declared for the 2015 NFL Draft and was taken in the 7th round by the Pittsburgh Steelers. Just like Hood, never really got his footing there. He spent time with the Steelers and the Buccaneers, but was eventually released and then went to both the Arena and Indoor Football League, where he was never heard from again. Holliman was the definition of a one-season wonder. The next guy I want to highlight is Tajae Sharpe. Coming out of Piscataway Township High School in New Jersey, nobody really wanted Tajae Sharpe coming out of high school. While he was both a football and basketball star, Tajae was listed as a 3-star recruit and was barely ranked inside the top 1,200 recruits in the class of 2012. He'd end up enrolling at UMass, where eventually he became one of the best wide receivers in college football. No one really saw that coming. He'd break out as a sophomore, catching 61 passes for 680 yards and 4 touchdowns in 2013, and then his 2014 and 15 seasons were both insane. In 2014, he got 85 passes for 1,300 yards and 7 touchdowns, and then in 2015, he ended up having 111 receptions for 1,300 yards and 5 scores. Sharpe became a second-team All-American and is probably the best receiver in school history, rivaling Andy Isabella. Sharpe in total had 277 catches for 3,486 yards and 16 touchdowns while with the Minutemen. After that, Sharpe was eventually drafted in the 5th round with the 140th overall selection and was taken by the Tennessee Titans. Sharpe would actually end up having a good rookie season, as he finished with 41 catches for 522 yards and 2 touchdowns, and had a similar stat line in both 2018 and 2019. In 2019 with the Titans, he had a career-high 4 touchdowns. In total, he played in 4 games with the Vikings, then played in 15 games with the Atlanta Falcons, before he then washed out of the NFL. In total in the league, he had 117 catches for 1,400 yards and 8 touchdowns. Tajae Sharpe was a superstar in UMass and had moderate success in the league. The first quarterback we're going to talk about is Jacory Harris. He ended up going to the prestigious Miami Northwestern High School, and Harris was a big deal. He was a 4-star recruit and the number 12 pro-style quarterback in the class of 2008, and Harris would eventually arrive at Miami and would start right away. He threw for 1,200 yards and 12 touchdowns as a freshman, and then had his superstar season in 2009. In total with the Canes, he threw for 3,300 yards with 24 touchdowns, but did have a crazy high 17 interceptions. Harris would then start the next 2 years at Miami, and in total with the Canes, he had nearly 9,000 passing yards and 70 passing touchdowns. Harris is seen as one of the better quarterbacks in Miami football history, but this would not get him drafted into the NFL. He ended up going undrafted, and while he received an invitation from both the Dolphins and Eagles, he was eventually waived, and he spent most of his time in the CFL. And in 2020, he actually became a firefighter for the local Miami area, which is kind of cool. Just a few years ago, Memphis was one of the best Group of 5 teams in college football, and Anthony Miller, in my opinion, was the best player from that time period. Coming out of Christian Brothers High School in Memphis, Tennessee, Anthony Miller for the most part was a superstar, but he was not highly recruited. In total, he was only ranked as a 2-star recruit and was actually the number 233rd overall wide receiver in the class of 2013. Miller would actually have to walk on to the Memphis Tigers, but in 2015 he would emerge. He caught 47 passes for 694 yards and 5 touchdowns, and then like Tajae Sharpe, had a crazy next 2 years. In 2016, Miller caught 95 passes for 1,400 yards and 14 touchdowns, and then in 2017, he got even better, catching 96 passes for 1,400 yards and 18 touchdowns. Miller helped the resurgence of Memphis football, and in total with the Tigers, caught 238 passes for 3,590 yards and 37 scores. Because of that, Miller was seen as a big-time draft prospect, and ended up going in the second round with the 51st overall pick to the Chicago Bears. Many thought that Miller would have a long career, and his first 3 years were solid. He caught 33 passes for 423 yards and a career-high 7 touchdowns as a rookie, but then his numbers would start to slowly fall. He did catch 52 passes for 656 yards and 2 scores in his second year, and then in 2020, he had 49 catches for 485 yards and 2 scores. Since then, we've seen a major drop-off, as in 2021 with the Texans, he caught 2 passes and 1 touchdown. As in 2021 with the Texans, he caught 5 passes and 1 touchdown, and then he played in 1 game with the Pittsburgh Steelers also that season. For some reason, Miller had a solid start to his NFL career, and then just completely dropped off the face of the earth. I'm not really sure what happened there, but that's what happened to Anthony Miller. The next guy I want to talk about is another running back, and that is Wendell Smallwood. Coming out of Eastern Christian High School in Delaware, Wendell Smallwood was ranked as a 3-star recruit and the number 24 all-purpose back in the class of 2013. He had a decent amount of Power 5 offers, but would eventually decide to go over to West Virginia. While he was with the Mountaineers, Smallwood had a terrific 3-year career. He had 221 yards as a freshman and then would break out in 2014, having 700 yards. The season that made him a college football superstar was 2015, as during that year with the Mountaineers, he ran for 1,519 yards with 9 total touchdowns. Because of that, he was an All-Big 12 selection, and Smallwood was also seen as a future NFL draft pick. He brought his 2,500 yards and 12 touchdowns to the 5th round of the 2016 NFL Draft, where he went with pick number 153 to the Philadelphia Eagles. Smallwood would then have a couple of decent years, as he had 300 yards and a touchdown as a rookie, 174 yards and a touchdown in 2017, and then his best season would come in 2018, finishing with 364 yards and 3 scores. From there, he then fell out, as he played 15 games with Washington in 2019, played 1 game with the Steelers in 2020, and then 3 more games at Washington in 2021. Another guy that you totally forgot about was Marvin Burdette. Coming out of South Panola High School in Mississippi, Burdette was a 0-star recruit and would eventually sign with UAB in the class of 2009. Burdette would end up playing immediately for the Blazers, finishing with 43 tackles in 2009, but would then go on one of the craziest stretches we've ever seen for a defensive player. In 2010, Burdette had 115 total tackles. In 2011, he had 92 tackles, and in 2012, he led college football with 157 tackles. Burdette in total with the Blazers finished with 407 tackles, 5 forced fumbles, 6 sacks, 3 interceptions, and a pick 6. He became one of the best players in UAB football history, and as I said, was the leading tackler in the 2012 season. Sadly though, Burdette was not able to make it to the NFL, as while he did get a couple of tryouts, he would not be able to stick on any sort of team, and eventually flamed out of football altogether. I feel like out of anybody on this list, he's a guy you totally forgot about or didn't even know existed. Up next, we have another defensive player, and that is Tim Williams. Coming out of University Lab High School in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Tim Williams became one of the best defensive end prospects in the class of 2013. After a ferocious battle between LSU and Bama, Williams would eventually sign with the Crimson Tide and was listed as a top 75 player in the class of 2013. Williams would eventually arrive at Alabama and quickly showed a ton of promise. In 2015, Williams had his breakout season, as with the Tide he had 19 tackles but had an absurd 10.5 sacks. Williams is one of the best pass rushers in all of college football, and because of that, he was receiving a ton of NFL hype. Sadly though, he ended up getting in a little bit of trouble with the Crimson Tide. and that would happen before the 2016 season. He still finished with 9 sacks in 2016, but that would definitely hurt his reputation a little bit. In total, Williams finished with 21 sacks in just 3 playing years at Bama, and he was eventually drafted in the 3rd round with pick number 78 by the Baltimore Ravens. Sadly, Williams was never really able to get going, as while he played in 8 games as a rookie, he did not have a single sack. He did get 2 sacks in 2018 with the Ravens, but then after just 4 games in 2019 with Baltimore, he was eventually released and never made it back to the NFL again. He got tryouts with the Packers and Seahawks, but was never able to get on the roster, and then he ended up going to the CFL. Williams was a dominant pass rusher during the Nick Saban era and really had a strong 2 years there. Ahkello Witherspoon was a pretty crazy player on this list. Born in Sacramento, he eventually went to Christian Brothers High School and only played 1 season of high school football. From there, he went the JUCO route and went to Sacramento City College, and then would eventually transfer to Colorado after being listed as a 2-star recruit. Witherspoon would actually end up having a tremendous career, as during his first 2 years in Boulder, he was just okay. Just like Gerod Holliman though, Witherspoon had one insane season. In 2016 with the Buffaloes, Witherspoon would finish with 23 tackles and an absurd 19 pass deflections. That would actually lead all of college football, and because of that, Witherspoon was an all Pac-12 player and was seen as a big-time draft pick. Eventually, he was taken by the San Francisco 49ers in the 3rd round with the 66th overall pick in the 2017 NFL Draft. Since then, Witherspoon's actually had a tremendous NFL career, as he played 4 years with the San Francisco 49ers, then 2 more years with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and is currently with the Rams. In total, Witherspoon has played in 82 games, has 214 tackles, has 11 interceptions, and 50 total pass deflections. You may have forgotten about Witherspoon having an insane season back in 2016, but he is still in the league and is still a good player. I'll be honest, I had no idea who Jerrod Johnson was. Coming out of Humble High School in Texas, Johnson must have been a big enough recruit to sign a scholarship with Texas A&M. While Johnson was with the Aggies, he'd end up having a good career there. He threw for 2,400 yards and 21 touchdowns in 2008, and then had his best season in 2009. He ended up throwing for a career-high 3,579 yards with 30 total touchdowns there. He came back in 2010, and he dropped to about 2,000 yards and 14 touchdowns, but in total at Texas A&M, Johnson had over 8,000 passing yards and 67 touchdowns. He holds the Big 12 record for throwing 242 consecutive passes without an interception, and was an all Big 12 player. Ultimately, he was not able to make it in the NFL, as he went undrafted and basically bounced around from each and every league until 2018. He then became a coach with the 49ers in 2017, went to the Colts from 2019 to 2021, was an assistant quarterbacks coach with the Vikings in 2022, and is currently the quarterbacks coach with the Houston Texans. Honestly, I did not know Jerrod Johnson even existed, but he was a good player and is now rising up the coaching ladder. Up next, we have a pretty crazy player in Tyler Matakevich. Coming out of New Berlin, New York, Matakevich was a 2-star recruit in the class of 2012. He's one of those guys who put up insane stats, but didn't exactly have the athletic measurables to translate to big-time college football. At least that's what they said. Tyler Matakevich would eventually arrive at Temple, and while he was there, he had a crazy career. He had 100 tackles his freshman year, 136 tackles his sophomore year, 117 tackles his junior year, and then 138 tackles his senior year. He helped Temple have a crazy season under Matt Rule in 2015 and led college football. In total, Matakevich had 492 tackles with 4 forced fumbles and 7 sacks. He was a tackling machine and became the 7th player in college football history to record 100 tackles all 4 seasons. He won multiple trophies and was a consensus All-American after the season, and was eventually drafted in the 7th round with pick number 246 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. From there, he spent 4 years with the Steelers from 2016 to 2019, then 4 years with the Buffalo Bills, and is currently back with the Steelers. In total, Matakevich has played in 131 NFL games, has 134 tackles, but somehow has failed to register a single sack. This guy was absolutely crazy and is still wreaking havoc on opposing teams. We now get to talk about another wide receiver, and that is Danario Alexander. Coming out of Marlin High School in Texas, Alexander was ranked as a 2-star recruit and the 193rd overall receiver in his class. While he was really solid in high school, I guess schools just didn't really want him all that much. But once he got there, he ended up following in Jeremy Maclin's footsteps and had a tremendous career with Mizzou. In 2008, he had a breakout season with 26 catches for 329 yards and 5 touchdowns, but his incredible year came in 2009. In total, Alexander led the country with 113 catches for 1,781 yards and 14 touchdowns. Alexander was one of the best receivers, if not the best receiver in college football, and was a first-team All-American in 2009. Except, sadly, Alexander had a problem. His knees were absolutely terrible. He ended up having surgery in February of 2010 and was unable to go to the Combine or the Pro Day. Knee injuries had been a problem his whole career, but despite going undrafted, he still found a way into the NFL. Alexander would play in 8 games with the St. Louis Rams in 2010, catching 20 passes for 306 yards and a touchdown. In 2011, Alexander would then have 26 catches for 431 yards and 2 touchdowns, and would actually have his best season once he was traded to the Chargers. In 2012, Alexander caught 37 passes for 658 yards and a career-high 7 scores. Alexander looked like a good young receiver in the NFL, but then unfortunately he would tear his ACL again and was out of football forever. I have no idea what he's doing now, but many people forget about his existence. Up next, we have a more recent player in JaTarvious Whitlow. Whitlow has a really weird story, as coming out of Lafayette High School in Alabama, he was seen as one of the top running backs in the class of 2017, as he was a 4-star recruit and the number 20 athlete in his class. He decided to go to Auburn, where pretty much immediately he was solid. In 2018, he ran the ball 150 times for 787 yards and 6 touchdowns, and then in 2019, he had 763 yards and 10 touchdowns. With one more season at Auburn, Whitlow was probably to go off to the NFL. Except from there, he just kind of fell off the face of the earth. Whitlow would decide to transfer to Western Illinois, and apparently never played another game of football. I can't really figure out what happened to him, but maybe something went on behind the scenes, but I'm sure something just went on behind the scenes. Whitlow was one of the best young running backs in the SEC, and then went to one of the worst schools in the FCS and was never heard from again. Another college football star with an interesting story is Jaelen Strong. Coming out of West Catholic High School in Philadelphia, Strong was a good player, but didn't really get an opportunity to impress college scouts. He eventually went to Pierce College for 2 years, and because of that, he worked his way back into college football. He was actually a 4-star junior college player and the number 5 receiver in his class, and would decide to enroll at Arizona State. From there, Strong had a terrific career with the Sun Devils, as in year 1, he had 75 catches for 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns, and then in 2014, he became a superstar, catching 82 passes for 1,165 yards and 10 scores. In 2 years, Strong had 157 catches for 2,300 yards and 17 touchdowns, and because of that, he was taken in the 3rd round with pick number 70 by the Houston Texans. He thought that Strong would definitely translate to the NFL, but sadly he never really got going. In 10 games as a rookie, he caught 14 passes for 161 yards and 3 touchdowns, but then in 2016 he failed to score a touchdown. In 2017 he played 1 game with Jacksonville and actually caught a touchdown, and from there Strong kind of just fell out of the NFL. He tried out for the Cleveland Browns but was cut, and now I have no idea what he's doing. Finally, we get to our last college football star that you totally forgot about, and that is quarterback Brandon Doughty. He's the guy on the thumbnail. Coming out of Coconut Creek High School in Florida, nobody really wanted Doughty coming out of high school. He eventually committed to Florida Atlantic before then going to Western Kentucky, and Western Kentucky got an absolute steal with him. Doughty wouldn't really start until his 3rd year, as in 2013, he threw for 2,800 yards with 14 touchdowns and 14 picks. Luckily from there, he would figure it out and became absolutely crazy. In 2014, he threw for 4,800 yards with 49 touchdowns and just 10 interceptions, and then in 2015, he threw for 5,055 yards with 48 scores and 9 touchdowns. Under Jeff Brom's air raid offense, Doughty became one of the best quarterbacks in college football and had absurd stats. He ended up finishing with 12,855 yards and 34 touchdowns, and this was enough to get him into the NFL. He ended up being taken at pick number 223 in the 7th round of the 2016 draft and would spend time with both the Miami Dolphins and the Arizona Cardinals. Sadly, he was never able to make it work while he was there, but he was a 2-time MVP of Conference USA, and he led college football in passing yards in 2 straight years. Doughty was an absolute superstar that many of you guys forget about, but who did I miss? There are plenty of college football stars that I guarantee were not in this video, and if there's a guy who you think deserves to be in part 2, be sure to let me know down below. Let me know what you think of these players, what topic I should do next, and before you go, don't forget to also leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and check out some of the videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.